Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is DreamFiction and today we will be reading the story Issei, the True Dragon of the Apocalypse, translated into English by Jyanzein. Wait, come here. Gasper exclaimed happily as he chased after the little dragon, trying to catch her. Her parents were present this time, not like the first time she went alone. Issei deigned to watch the whole interaction with a small smile. I think he's ready now, he said to himself internally, watching Gasper enjoy himself without any trouble at all. Soon after, he couldn't help but frown at a thought that had been gnawing at him these past few days. According to what the president told me 2 weeks ago, the mutated pieces are the cause of not suffering from demonic corruption, and that's why they're considered a glitch, even though it boosts reincarnation, and thus, the overall stats of its user. Even Issei himself was a bit taken aback by using such specific words, but he quickly put that aside. What bothers me is that some sort of piece had already been created to stop demonic corruption from acting, and that very solution is taken as a bug. It's rather ironic, being that the flaw is that very corruption in the first place. Due to it corrupting people, Issei couldn't help but sigh, something the Dragoness's parents picked up on. She also mentioned something about the difference between humans and demons. Perhaps that's the explanation as to why more mutated pieces weren't crafted. The young man rubbed his hair hard in annoyance. I'm giving it too much thought. Besides, I'm fine with them being discontinued if it's causing more people to end up like Gasper, completely cut off from the world. Or killing them. Drake interrupted in his mind, causing Issei to grimace slightly. The current demons may have their wiles, but I doubt they would be able to go to such an extreme. He replied in his mind, causing Drake to frown. Do you still remember what I told you when we first met? Drake asked, causing Issei to nod. Very well, because I still think the same thing. Tiamat told me exactly the same thing. Thought is bare. But it's only natural for the dragons to be so suspicious of the 3 biblical factions after what they did. You're right, but it's also true that you're too trusting. Refuted Drake, causing his partner to nod inwardly. I know. After what I've experienced, I'll be more attentive to what Riaz does, just in case. He finished, then calmly closed his eyes. Speaking of Tiamat, Issei couldn't help but open one of his eyes when he caught the rather amused tone of his tenant. Remember how those 2 women reacted when they saved you just in time before you had forced sex with a reincarnated blue-haired brat? Issei couldn't help but sweat at the memory. It had happened a couple of days ago. Zenobia had locked him in the academy hall, saying different barbarities about wanting a strong son. She even pointed the sword against his neck to keep him from moving. Had it not been for Tiamat and Penemu, he would have lost his virginity at that moment in the worst possible way. Just remembering how Tiamat almost killed her with one blow made a great shiver run through her whole body. In fact, perhaps the Dragoness would have killed her if Penemu hadn't stopped her with her words. Although, clearly the cadre's icy eyes were far scarier than Tiamat's gaze, something that in itself should not be overcome under any circumstances. A deep shiver ran through his body after remembering those looks, which quickly changed to one of full concern for him, claiming him if Zenobia had done anything to him. Perhaps they were much more overprotective than he had first thought. The good thing about that was that Zenobia had surely already completely abandoned the idea of raping Issei, even if that idea had been erased from her memory by the strong blow on the head she received from Tiamat. Yes, Zenobia wouldn't dare to bother him again. Chapter 31. The True Power of the Vampire. Do you plan to take him here? Penemu asked with great intrigue, which was demonstrated by her perfectly raised eyebrow. I think he's ready for the last test now. Issei commented as he sat down on the couch next to her. Being a 2-person couch, they were a bit cramped. For some reason, whenever I come here, I feel like it's getting nicer and nicer. He added, giving a small compliment to the cadre's apartment, then fixing his gaze on the woman, seeing that she was carrying the small statuette of the 2 of them and Tiamat in her hands. I always carry it with me when I get a little nervous. Cadre stated, seeing that Issei's gaze was fixed on the statuette. Omitting the fact that that was too cute, Issei couldn't help but be surprised. What's wrong? He asked, raising an eyebrow. You never get nervous. He concluded, though that final verdict wasn't entirely true. But something Azazel will tell you. He has more details. Cadre explained, rising from her seat, leading him to the door. You have a lot of work to do today, as do I. A tiny smile appeared on her face, the kind that no one could see, except for those closest to the woman. I wish you luck. The young man just rested his hand on the cadre's shoulder as a farewell. Just as he was about to walk down the stairs, was interrupted one last time. Before you go, I'd like you to tell him something. In fact, it's something that will do you some good, too. Cadre commented with complete seriousness from the doorway, something Issei picked up on instantly. Be careful what you wish for. Sometimes a person's deepest desires can turn into impulses that lead to terrible decisions. Issei couldn't help but lower his head rather empathetically. You're saying that because of your past, aren't you? He finally asked, receiving a nod from the cadre. You are just starting out in this world, but you have incredible potential. Make sure that potential doesn't end up being poisoned by dangerous desires, or you will regret it for the rest of your lives. She concluded, closing the door. A small silence followed the farewell as the brown man looked down at his hands. And how do I know that none of my desires will lead me to that side? He wondered, unable to find an answer. He was still too naive. At the club of the occult. You finally came. Azazel commented, arranging a couple of strange contraptions on a new piece of furniture in Issei's eyes. Will you help me arrange them? He asked, seeing that Issei quickly nodded and accompanied him. Be careful. They're the weirdest sacred gears I've ever encountered and I still can't quite figure them out. Warned, handing him one that looked like some sort of slightly small square golden shield with a purple gem in the center. Issei just nodded again, as helped to arrange the sacred gears. Azazel could distinguish something odd in his attitude due to the fact that he was looking very thoughtful. Is something bothering you? The boss asked, causing Issei to rub his hair with a small smile as he looked like an open book. Before I came here, I had a conversation with Penemu. Issei clarified, receiving an intrigued look from Azazel. She said that, sometimes, a person's deepest desires can turn into impulses that lead to terrible decisions. Issei could only lower his gaze slightly. I'm just wondering if I'm really doing things right. Things right, huh? Azazel asked, unable to help but smile at the boy's doubt. Tell me Issei, do you believe in right and wrong? Issei couldn't help but feel confused at the redundant question. Of course. He replied. Okay. Azazel handed him another sacred gear, giving him a sidelong glance. For you, have you always done good? Participating in someone's death is definitely not doing good. The young man quickly replied, and it was at that moment that Azazel could tell why he was hesitating so much. So, do angels do evil in your opinion? The fallen angel asked, causing Issei to look at him, indicating that the answer was obvious. Need I remind you how many people they killed in the Great War? That last question caused a great revelation to fall upon Issei. Azazel widened his smile even more after seeing the reaction. The correct answer is that there is no good and evil. There is only right and wrong. And how will I know if I'm on the right path? Issei asked with much confusion. It's a very superficial thing. Issei, you're a good-natured idiot. At the answer, the boy couldn't help but roll his eyes. All the people that surrounded you, all those people. Mainly Tiamat and Penemu, they taught you those values a long time ago. I understand you're afraid of going astray. Azazel placed the last sacred gear Issei reached for him, then positioned a hand on his head. But there are many times when going astray is the best solution to the worst problems. He stated, handing him a toothy grin. Think of it this way, Cadre commented, thinking of an example. Perhaps there will be some occasion when you must defy the rules of your own mistress to save a person who is very important to you, maybe from death or an even worse fate. That is for circumstances to decide. But, if you always do right by one person for defying a rule, or if you always do right by your people with the death of a few, isn't that right? He concluded, then removed his hand from his head. I'm glad you have morality, that helps a lot in going to the right path. But, you must understand that morality in this world is so abstract and presumptuous that it becomes completely absurd. We are only worth for our people, we only live for our people, we only fight for our people, and only those people fight for us, only those people live for us, only those people are worth for us. In my way of seeing things, there are no manipulations, there are no tricks. Everyone I consider family, they are those people I will protect to the death, even if I have to start another war to do it, which is a bit contradictory. He concluded, mocking himself for his last words. Issei was completely stunned at his words. In fact, if there was any doubt within him about his past actions, they had completely disappeared. That was probably where that small shred of his humanity finally left him completely as well. Why are you telling me all this? Issei asked, completely amazed at his words. I'm not going to lie to you. Cadre commented quickly. At first, I was only interested in you because of your sacred gear, I wanted to investigate it. But for obvious reasons, I ended up investigating you as well. Azazel crouched down in front of him and positioned a hand on his shoulder. After watching your various performances, it has become very clear to me. You are a man who has respect. Affirmed, squeezing the boy's shoulder, then getting up and heading for the door. And respect is not just a word, it's much more than that. For you, what is respect? Issei asked, watching as Azazel stopped and looked at him sideways. A smile shot across the cadre's face. When someone has respect, he never neglects the people he really cares about protecting. Azazel looked straight ahead again. That's why I give you answers. The more you learn, the more chances you have to protect those people. Knowledge is everything, because you get to be great, to be strong, to be fast. That way you get to survive longer. Azazel fixed his gaze on Issei, denoting a much more serious look than usual. And in your average time of life, you'd better not waste the moment. The first time could be your last time. Concluded, resuming his walk. With all those teachings, you sound like my father. Issei commented with a smile, which quickly waned. Well, actually you don't look even a little bit like, he corrected, rubbing his hair. Whatever you say, dynamic brat. Azazel paused just before closing the door, having remembered something very important. I almost missed the real talk we were going to have here. He said to the air, causing Issei to glare at him. Still, it's not that important. He continued, looking at the boy with his typical nonchalant face. I just have to tell you that tomorrow there's an all-factions gathering. Before it begins, you are to escort the God King of Asgard. Concluded, closing the door. What? Issei shouted at the top of his lungs. You call that unimportant? The shout was clearly heard outside the old building, to which Azazel only managed to wipe his right ear with his little finger, as if he hadn't heard anything. Now Azazel could perfectly understand Penemu's uneasiness. A few minutes later. It had taken a long time, but he was finally able to do it. Asper left the Kuo Academy on the condition that if he panicked in the slightest, would return inside the room where he had always been locked up. It should be emphasized that Issei accepted that condition practically instantly, as knew perfectly well the outcome. For that reason they had visited the family kingdom for 2 long weeks. If you don't open your eyes, it doesn't count. Issei exclaimed, giving a big pat on his back to encourage him. The vampire slowly opened his eyes, and the first thing he noticed is that the sunlight on Earth is much stronger than that of hell. The first thing he distinguished in front of him were the gates of the academy open, followed by the typical sound of a busy city. As idiotic as it sounds, this was fascinating to the boy. It didn't take him long to watch as a couple of students passed by on the outer side of the gates, being immensely surprised when he simply felt nothing. That's right, he felt nothing. But Gasper had been speechless. He didn't understand how he could watch all those smiling people walk by without even getting nervous. You were in the familiar kingdom for 2 weeks, an extremely hostile place at all times. It was normal to be alert under those circumstances. Issei commented, placing a hand on the vampire's shoulder. But, in a place where hostility is almost non-existent, why would you need to be alert or nervous? There's simply no reason to be afraid to use your powers if you're not going to use them in the first place. Issei gave him a huge toothy grin. You know what I mean. He concluded, causing Gasper to look at him with a huge gleam in his eye. And that was how they both passed through various places in Kuo, just having fun. Zero stress, zero nerves. They were simply free to have fun. They visited so many places that the chestnut couldn't help but thank Azazel for gifting him so much money. Without him, the whole adaptation would most likely never have been finished. Although, the most important point was still missing. The hours passed quickly and dusk began to dominate the sky. An incredible view from the rooftop of Kuo Academy for someone who had been cooped up for years. Asper admired the view in silence, then looked intently at Issei, who seemed to be watching as Riaz and the others left the occult club. Yet another glance was directed at the window where Penemu lived. The woman was in plain view, doing her annoying paperwork. Gasper could tell that gaze was parked for much longer, unlike the previous one. What do you see? Issei's question caught the vampire a bit off guard, who only deigned to glance at the members of the occult club, with no answer. Issei bent his hand towards them and clenched it tightly into a fist. I can see it clearly. It's what drives me. He replied, then fixed his gaze back on Penemu. No one is perfect, but everyone has a purpose. Mine is to fight for what I believe in, what excites me, and what I love. Issei's eyes reflected Penemu's figure as that woman fixed her hair with a small smile as she gave her statuette a quick glance. It doesn't matter that I'm the weakest Securite. With a purpose like that, you're unstoppable. Issei finally lowered his hand, though his serious face never disappeared. That's why I always train, that's why I always want to learn, that's why I always give my best. After all, to always see a smile on the faces of the people you hold most dear is something no one and nothing can match. Issei continued to stare intently at Penemu, so he didn't notice Gasper's impressed look. That's something you still have yet to learn. And you'd better do it fast, before it's too late, concluded, having a small reminder of Arena. Issei stood up, implying that it was all over for the day. Gasper stood up quickly, unable to stop Issei's words from gnawing at his mind. Before Issei went downstairs with Gasper, the Brown gave one last glance to Penemu, who seemed to have answered it, mysteriously. They both went down the stairs, and once they did, that's when strange things started to happen. I want a repeat of today. Gasper exclaimed with a big smile. I doubt we'll be able to tomorrow. Issei replied, causing Gasper to look at him, confused. It's a very important day, where you'll probably be present as well. Issei couldn't finish his sentence as everything changed to a more sinister hue at the same time as the sky turned completely green. What is this? Gasper wondered aloud, clearly alarmed. It's a pocket dimension, replied the older one quickly, standing close to the vampire. Someone dragged us here and that can never be good, he concluded, unfolding his armor. From the highest rooftop of the academy, a subject could be seen adjusting his hood. Though looking at his proportions, it was clearly a woman. Her face was shadowed, so her lips could barely be seen. I can't believe I'm going to do this, commented the woman to herself. She had a voice that was quite recognizable to everyone. The woman folded her arms and took a step forward where there was nothing. Just like that, she dropped down at an impressive speed, with only one target. That target her feet aimed at when they landed on top of the head of a completely stunned Issei at the entrance, who resulted with his helmet shattering into 1,000 pieces and with his face buried in the same crater propelled by the blow. Before Gasper could even react, the hooded woman shook her arm violently and created a huge wind current, sending him flying and sending him crashing into the wall of the building. A rather tense silence dominated the atmosphere as the woman finally pulled her feet away from her target's face and lifted him by his shirt as if he were a garbage bag. When she pulled his face out of the large crack, it could be seen how his face was a bleeding mess. The hooded woman brought her face close to Issei's and proceeded to say quietly. The things I do for you. The hooded woman stopped looking at him when she felt someone tug on her sleeve. The woman turned around, only to see Gasper and how his eyes had activated his sacred gear due to the large magic circle at his feet. By senpai, it was Gasper's simple comment, with a tone that had been much harsher than normal, and his gaze accompanied that tone perfectly. The woman didn't even hear his words, sending him away with a loud smack across the face. Gasper rolled around like a rugby ball until he finally crashed into the wall again, this time, generating a few small cracks. I can't move, Issei thought in complete surprise, as he was using a great deal of his power to move, but it was impossible for him. He wasn't just controlling the time, there was something else there. I'm sorry, but I have to take your dear friend, the woman stated, putting one of her hands in her pocket as she shouldered Issei like a sack of potatoes. They pay a lot for such a rare sacred gear. He started taking slow steps to leave until he heard faint words behind him. Gasper stood up with great difficulty as he wiped the blood from his mouth. Did you say something? He asked with a rather mocking smile, causing Gasper to clench his fists tightly as a couple of images of Issei's words and teachings flashed through his head. Let him go. He shouted at the top of his lungs, causing a reddish energy to appear in his body at the same time as he took off in a burst of speed towards the woman's direction. In less than a second, he reached her and grabbed her face, burying her face deep into the pavement. The woman seemed surprised at such an act, or maybe not. In fact, she was surprised not by the outburst, but by the fact that the pressure of the magic circle became much stronger, so she assumed that he had released his balance breaker. Gasper's gaze calmed when saw that Issei had been released from her grip, though that look quickly twisted to one of concern when he saw that she was unable to move because of her power. Still, he couldn't worry too much as he received a strong spinning kick from the ground from the woman, now without her hood. Thanks to this, a large amount of fairly recognizable light blue hair was released in several directions. Gasper stood up with some difficulty, watching as Tiamat stared at him with her typical stoic expression. The vampire boy only had to blink, for out of nowhere she appeared inches away from him, delivering a hard blow to his face that made him spit out an absurd amount of blood. A great beating began to ensue from the dragoness towards the vampire. The numerous sounds of boost were heard, at the same time Issei rushed out towards her direction, screaming with great fury as she delivered a heavy blow to her back that generated a small shockwave. Tiamat simply looked back with her typical expression, implying that the attack hadn't even tickled her. The dragoness let go of Gasper's face and dropped him like garbage to the ground, then turned away. The brat ended up being stronger than you expected, she said to him, to then deliver a strong blow to Isseik's face, leaving him lying on the ground due to the enormous power. When Tiamat thought it was all over, she felt a huge pressure come on. Much stronger than the previous one, it might even be more than twice as much as a few moments ago. Issei practically sank into the concrete because of this. The reddish magic circle became even bigger and more intense, causing Tiamat to turn her gaze to see Gasper rising up. A sort of white and grey aura bubbled around him like a huge ripple, eventually returning to its usual reddish color. His hair began to float from the immense magical energy emanating from it, and when he lifted his gaze, it could be seen that the color of his red eyes was even deeper, at the same time one had the mark of a clock and the other possessed a mark similar to a slit, giving it a kind of imaginary depth. I said let go, he commented, with a face that could have frightened anyone. The vampire widened his eyes exceedingly, causing another large magic circle to appear over Tiamat's head, generating a murderous grey light, only to have the entire floor completely shatter a second later due to the same gravity as the magic circle hit the ground. A huge crater had been generated, though Tiamat seemed unaffected by the enormous pressure and the attempt on time control. Still, she couldn't help but be rather impressed. Jasper tipped his hand forward, causing a small magic circle to appear in his hand. Not a second later, Tiamat went flying towards Jasper's hand after the strong gravity, where the vampire grabbed her hard by the face and slammed her into a wall, generating rather slight cracks. "Go fly away," commanded the vampire, causing huge magical circles to appear in the sky and below Tiamat, where the building suddenly exploded from the gravity in the sky and from the large amount of quite powerful magical attacks that erupted from the ground. Amidst all the explosions and all the debris, Tiamat reached the sky because of the magic circle, only to see Jasper land in front of her. The dragoness did not hesitate to deliver a heavy blow to his abdomen that made the vampire spit out a large amount of blood, but he seemed to refuse to give up. After all, his red eyes were still glowing brightly. Jasper grabbed her by the neck and threw her towards the ground, at the same time as numerous magical circles accompanied in the sky, casting various rather powerful magical attacks. When she finally hit the ground, already destroyed by the combat, everything around her turned black and white, at the same time that two magic circles collided with each other while she was in the center, generating a kind of strange vortex that contracted everything that was near, only for the color to return to normal, and there was a huge explosion that sent everything to fly. Issei fell into the distance, getting up with some difficulty, unable to avoid being completely impressed by what he witnessed. He just looked up to see that the Kuo Academy replica had been completely destroyed in just seconds. "Are you okay?" The recognizable voice made Issei turn around, only to see Jasper with all his hair standing on end. It was a funny enough sight, but it wasn't a time when he should be laughing. Before Issei could even answer, Tiamat appeared out of nowhere, grabbing the vampire by the back of his already ragged shirt, making the boy kick to free himself. The color changed completely back to gray and black, though neither of them looked affected. "I guess having the soul of the underdeveloped lizard helps you stay conscious under the time domain," Tiamat commented in the most casual manner, causing Jasper to stop kicking after hearing Drake's nickname. "Underdeveloped lizard?" he thought with wide eyes. "Issei told me that only one person used that nickname often." "Damn, I think you went a little overboard," Issei commented, wiping the blood from his nose. "You think?" The tone of great concern in Tiamat made Jasper only more confused. "Did I hurt you badly?" she asked, releasing Jasper and quickly approaching him, assessing his wounds. Issei could only blush at the dragoness's great concern and how she stroked every part of his face in a desperate attempt to soothe him. "As usual, you're too soft," Penemu commented, appearing out of nowhere with two phoenix tears. Jasper obviously felt like his head was about to explode. It simply didn't understand anything. "How was the evaluation?" Issei asked, taking the phoenix tear and causing a rather relieved look to cross Tiamat's face. "It's a lot more than I expected," Penemu commented, placing a hand on her chin. In addition to being able to use his balance breaker, he also has an evolution of it. Not to mention the fact that to use that much power, he needs an absurdly high amount of magic. Concluded, handing a glance to the boy. "In fact, I find it amazing that he can still stand." "Is that what the mutated pieces do?" Issei asked in utter amazement. "I don't think so," was Penemu's quick reply. "You must possess a great affinity with your sacred gear to be able to do such things. The only thing the mutated piece does is that a subject like him, who is much stronger than his mistress, can reincarnate and enter the nobility of such a person." "I understand," Issei commented, nodding slightly. "Still, an evolution of his balance breaker. That's kind of surprising." Jasper began to wave his hands in great exasperation, indicating that he was looking for an answer. Seeing this, Issei approached him with a smile. "Sorry for testing you like this," the Sekiryuite commented, handing him the phoenix tear. "But it was the best way for you to experience the loss of a close person. I'm glad, because unlike me, you managed to respond in time." Concluded, sketching a toothy grin. "This wouldn't have had any effect if I had told you earlier. Though your attacks were not as forceful as they could have been," Tiamat commented, thundering her neck. "It's not because of his lack of experience, but because he was still trying to hold back. It didn't work out too well for him," though she finished, emphasizing all the destruction caused. "Maybe, but at least it's a start," Issei commented with a small smile. The dragoness tilted her head from side to side, indicating that she didn't agree so much with the answer. "Issei, who is?" Jasper asked, referring to the dragoness. "Remember in my stories I always mention Tiamat to you?" he asked, causing Jasper's eyes to widen. "Well, she's Tiamat. The bad madam is your first mistress," Gasper exclaimed, thoroughly impressed. A small twitch appeared in Tiamat's eyebrow. "Madam," she exclaimed. "I may be over 20,000 years old, but I look 25." She concluded, clearly offended after the comment. Issei and Penemu laughed after the interaction. "Never mind that," Issei replied with a chuckle. "Even if you look 30 or 40, it's impossible for you to stop being beautiful." Obviously, Tiamat couldn't disguise the huge blush that shot up her cheeks. Meanwhile, in the sky. "Are you sure this will go well?" Dulio asked, rubbing his hair. "Don't worry." He was soothed by Michael, arranging some papers. "Having my sister as my squire, it won't be a problem." "You know that's not what I mean," Seraph commented. "There is no need for a meeting. The prophecy indicates that we all come to the end. There will be no more wars between us, at least, not until Trihixa's dimensional prison is broken, or close to it. Which I remind you, is still 2000 years away. Remember what our father said," Michael observed with great seriousness. "Trying to take advantage of what the prophecy indicates could bring fluctuations, and in such a case, we could all die. It is best to act as we would have acted in the event that the prophecy had never been announced." "True, I had forgotten that detail," Dulio rubbed his cheek with a nervous smile. "But is there really a need to invite Asgard and the Yakes to the peace treaty?" "Of course," Michael replied without any hesitation, resting his chin on his hands. "We are talking about the Securitate and the Hacker Yuku. Right now, both the demons and the fallen angels have far more power than we do. If we add more pressure from other sides, then it's more complicated for a war to be generated, regardless of the fact that Azazel and Surziches don't seem to be interested in one after what happened in the last one. I can understand about Vali, he could destroy all of Asgard by himself, the strongest faction currently," Dulio commented, rubbing his chin. "But, I honestly don't understand the concern for Issei," he added with a rather confused tone. "After all, he is the weakest Securitate ever." "He's the weakest until he stops being weak," was Michael's simple reply, closing his eyes. "It doesn't hurt to take precautions. Right now, we're the second worst faction as far as power is concerned, only the Yakai are worse than us, and it's only because they were almost extinguished in the battle against Trihixa." "I understand." Dulio nodded, then raised an eyebrow. "And what about the Olympians?" "You know well that they became isolated from everyone when the humans abandoned those beliefs," he replied, closing his eyes calmly. "They act like infatuated children," Dulio scoffed. "God created humans in the first place. Therefore, they should have always had Christian beliefs," he concluded, receiving a nod from Michael. "No doubt about it, this whole factions thing always turned out to be rather touchy. At least, the pressure of that very thing was notoriously reduced with the annihilation of some and the near disappearance of others. At the Haidu residence. Thank you so much for today," Issei commented, cuddling with Tiamat on the bed. "I know it's not easy for you to hurt me that much." "No problem," clarified the Dragoness, snuggling into Issei even more. "It seemed out of line when you asked me for that favor over 2 weeks ago, but I suppose it was a necessary thing to do." Issei just nodded. "Tomorrow will be a hectic day," the boy commented, holding the bridge of his nose. "I have go to Asgard." "Don't worry, I'll be alert at all times," commented the Dragoness, making a quick turn to mount on top of him. "I'll go to the meeting." "But, you're not invited," Issei commented with slight astonishment. "I don't care," Tiamat replied, resting her head on her future lover's chest. "It's a pretty dangerous place, and I don't plan on leaving you alone." Issei just smiled at her words and hugged her, something Tiamat gladly received. "I always say I'm going to protect you, but in the end you always end up protecting me," Issei commented with slight grace. "I have that right too," the Dragoness stated, leaning back with even more comfort after feeling the warmth from Issei's embrace. She wished could stay that close to him forever. "How is the Valkyrie training coming along?" Auden asked, watching out of the corner of his eye as Roswa sat down in front of the desk. "I didn't have much time today to see them." He spat. "Things are going well at the moment, Lord Auden," Valkyrie replied quickly. "The exercises, training, and friendly battles are bringing a great result as usual." Auden watched her for a short second after her answer, then looked down at his papers again. "The strength of the Valkyries has increased a bit in recent times," he stated with satisfaction. "It is something quite necessary due to the fact that they are all that is left of Asgard's army, besides an old god and his 2 foolish sons." He concluded, unable to help but frown. "But we are the most powerful faction," Roswis commented, not understanding the concern of her referring leader. "That's the amazing thing, child," Auden replied, causing Roswis to pout a little at the nickname. "Stop calling me that," she exclaimed rather annoyed. "You're still a child," Auden sneered. "Back to the main topic, the case that we are currently the most powerful faction indicates how bad the supernatural world was left after the battle against Trihixa. The god couldn't help but clench his pen tightly after the memory of the numerous lives lost and the enormous destruction. If it hadn't been for the other two dragon gods, God and the Demon King, no one would remember what happened. After all, there would be no one to remember. I was informed that the gathering was chosen near Trihix's prison. Commented the Valkyrie, denoting concern. Don't you think it's a bit risky? No one is stupid enough to break the seals of a beast that would simply destroy everything and everyone. God affirmed. That place was strategically chosen, being that there was the only time where we all came together with one goal. It's a remembrance, saying, if we did it before, why not now? Odin raised both eyebrows to emphasize his words. Back to the main topic, it's quite good to see that you're managing to carry on your work even better than your grandmother. Complimented the god with a small smile. You'd better get used to leading them, because that's your future, which in fact, is already quite close. He concluded, returning his gaze to his papers. Odin disguised the fact that Roswis lowered her gaze rather sadly. Not that she didn't feel a great honor in being that. The Valkyrie's great sadness was due to another factor, and it was strictly tied to it. What about my brother? Roswis deflected the subject, with the clear intentions of not thinking about it. Roswell is carrying with a small group. God quickly replied. They're not as strong as he is, but I think they could be of great help, even your brother could become my right-hand man once you turn 25 physically. There he was at it again. She tried to dodge it, but it always kept coming back to her. Odin put a hand to his chin as he thought further about Ross's brother. In fact, I think I might assign close surveillance to my son Loki, who's been making some rather strange movements lately. Hearing the subject, Roswis couldn't help but blink with great intrigue. Did something happen with Loki? Omitting the fact that he's been seen with Office a few days ago, Loki is very relaxed. Odin overly earnest in his gaze. And you know well that he never fails to complain about his brother Thor or Myrane. Do you think that's a bad sign? Ross asked with a serious look. Unlike Thor, Loki has always been someone who is fascinated by knowledge. Hell, he's basically a big mass of it. The god commented, making the Valkyrie sweat at the sarcastic remark. I'm just thinking he must have discovered something he didn't like one bit. He concluded, narrowing his eyes. A reunion? Valkyrie asked, raising an eyebrow. There are a lot of factions he doesn't like, but I doubt he would do anything at the time. Odin thought aloud at length. It's probably something else, and knowing that he didn't learn his past lessons very well, I'm sure it won't mean anything good. The talk couldn't go on any longer due to someone knocking on the door. Come in. Odin shouted, watching as Issei entered the room, bowing to the two people inside. I suppose you must be Lord Odin. Commented the Secretary with slight nervousness. It is an honor to meet you. The Secretary Ross thought with slightly widened eyes. No need to be so formal, boy. The god stated with complete informality, something that certainly caught his guest's attention. Chapter 32. Destined. Part 1. You already know that Vali is the Yakai's escort? Odin asked, looking at the now seated Issei. Yes, old man. The boy replied, causing a comical drop to roll down Ross's head at the nickname, while Odin seemed to start to regret telling him that there was no need to be so formal. Azazel briefed me on everything before I came here. Issei couldn't help but look at the god's monocle with great intrigue, as it was completely opaque. I mean, why was he wearing one of those if it didn't even allow him to look through, and vice versa? I see, Odin replied, resting a hand on his chin. Do you know the reason? Issei looked down, thinking the answer through. I wasn't told anything about it. But considering that this meeting was created specifically by the two of us, it makes me think that escorting two other factions with me and Vali is like saying, we share our power with you, so you can see that we really want peace. Issei stated, trying to explain himself as best he could. Amazing. Ross exclaimed, genuinely impressed. I had been told that you only entered the supernatural world a few months ago, but you already seem to understand things quite well. Said the woman with a small smile. Well, I suppose it's a matter of logic, Issei commented, rubbing his hair at the praise. Although, I should also say that I had an instructress who helped me with those specific issues. Odin couldn't help but look between the two with a tiny smile. She is Roswis. She is currently a Valkyrie and my right hand. A rather mocking smile appeared on the god's face. By the way, one of the most dishonorable Valkyries, due to the fact that she is the first to take so long to get a husband. That last was needless to say. Ross rose from her seat as small comical tears threatened to roll down her cheeks. Is she serious? Issei wondered internally. He was quite impressed since, from his point of view, the Valkyrie wasn't all that bad. Eventually, those comical tears in her bright face ended up changing to something completely depressive, something that alerted the young man. She sat up and lowered her gaze as she trembled slightly and said the following words. Besides, you know that's not my fault. Odin couldn't help but look at her with some empathy at her last words. but not enough to stop bothering her forever. At least, not until she had a husband. But for the time being, he would decide to give poor Valkyrie a break. I think it's about time. Auden stood up from his seat, causing Ross's completely depressed look to calm down a bit, while Issei couldn't help but look between the two of them with a raised eyebrow. Understood. Sekiryuite exclaimed, rising from his seat. Those were pretty private things anyway, and it would be best not to disturb. Meanwhile, in a completely isolated place. Only the sky and the blood-red color of the sand were the clues to know that the place was hell. In the distance, one could see how a sort of dimensional breach seemed to be perfectly controlled, although it was surprising how gigantic it was. Only a few distortions could be seen around the huge thin line that led to another dimension, while 3 large seals were in charge of keeping that door closed. The scarcity of tremors and large distortions further reinforced the fact that this dimensional prison was under complete control. For now. Around it, there was nothing but huge craters and mountains of sand, in addition to the sand itself. It seemed to have been a scene of war 1,000 years ago, and the result of erosion and destruction had left the land completely infertile. In all that completely desolate place, a huge construction could be seen, and there inside is where the most important men of the supernatural world were. Bali leaned against a wall while he watched everyone present. He seemed to be not very interested in this whole meeting, but he had no choice. He was present on Azazel's orders. Anyway, the albino found the sight interesting due to the fact that Tiamat was at the other end of the room with exactly the same posture as him, apparently waiting for his destined rival. It was somewhat curious due to the fact that it was his understanding that she had not been invited. But, the truth is, who would dare tell her to leave? The faction leaders looked at each other as sweat ran down their faces. They all had a few smiles on their faces, but it was obvious that the situation was a bit tense. Especially since one of the leaders had not yet arrived. Enemu positioned herself next to Tiamat and they began to chat in a low voice while observing those present. There was Riaz and most of her servants, Gabriel and Ajuka Beelzebub. Neither Gasper nor Kaneko were in the meeting room, but neither was something that bothered him. Strange that you didn't bring any squires, Yasaka. Azazel broke the silence, turning his gaze to the Yakai woman. You know well that our species no longer has any particularly strong warriors, so it would be foolish to bring anyone here. Commented the blonde woman with a small smile. But, it's also not necessary. After all, if things get out of hand, everyone knows what the outcome will be like, she concluded, handing Tiamat a small glance. Obviously, everyone took the hint. Simply put, if anyone tried anything, probably no one would make it out alive, except for her. And perhaps, also the cadre, who seemed to get along quite well with the Dragon Queen. Everyone was distracted from their thoughts when a small snow-white magic circle appeared in the small room, seeing Auden finally making an appearance, along with his 2 other companions. You're late. Serziches commented, resting his hand against his chin. Sorry, we got lost on the road of life. Commented the god without giving much thought to the Demon King's comment, taking a seat. Issei couldn't help but fix his gaze on Vali for a short second, which he returned it with a half smile. Though clearly, it didn't seem to be very friendly. What are some lower and upper class demons doing in this place? Auden asked, unable to help but raise an eyebrow, fixing his gaze on Riaz, Asia, Zenobia, Kiba and Akeno. As you may know, Issei belongs to my sister's servitude. Serziches replied quickly. They have the right to be here. He concluded, then handed a glance to Michael. But let's not digress. After all, you haven't exactly told us the reason for this meeting. That is, omitting the fact of the clear intention in signing the peace, you know. Serziches looked at Auden and Yasaka, intending to make his words even clearer. You must know perfectly well why. Gabriel tried to speak, but Michael stopped her with his hand. She had forgotten that only leaders could speak unless it was necessary to interrupt. Excuse my sister. The seraph commented with a smile, causing Serziches to wave his hand, indicating that he didn't mind. But, she has a point there. You all know that we called this meeting with 2 foreign factions to add extra pressure to the treaty. After all, you have 2 incredibly large forces on your side. Therefore, if only we requested that meeting, you could have ignored it without a problem. The Sky Leader explained. Because in the event that we give you some trouble, you could quickly take care of us. The only thing that assures me of the intervention of 2 foreign factions is the fact that both demons and fallen angels don't do as they please with their might because everyone is watching them. So, having so many important people here and now, the idea of refusing the treaty is not so easy to take. Michael's eyes got a somewhat dangerous gleam in them. After all, refusing it is the equivalent of declaring war on us. At this, Serziches and Azazel couldn't help but laugh fiercely, something that took those on the sidelines by surprise, with the exception of Tiamat, who really wasn't giving the subject much thought. Have you already forgotten that we overthrew the followers of the previous Demon King because we didn't seek war? demon asked graciously. There was no need to go to such an extreme. We would have agreed one way or the other. I agree with the Issei. Azazel stated, leaning back in his seat. For the most part, wars are the product of people's greed and worldly desires. It can even be a desire as simple as the need to destroy everything. They may try to hide the motive through their faith or anything else, but the truth will always be the same. Pursuit of wealth, power and authority, well, almost always. Audrey commented at last, raising both his hands. It is known that angels do fight for their faith. But, it's just a rather large exception to the theme. He concluded, leaning back further in the chair. I know you both agree with eliminating every tension or conflict. They've demonstrated it before, and that's why I know they'll sign the treaty, along with our gracious guests. Michael stated with a huge smile. Isaka couldn't help but look at Michael with a smile. This man is much more than just a pretty face, she thought, watching as he pushed the demons and fallen angels to their limit. Fine by me. Azazel commented quickly, settling himself nicely in his seat. All I'm interested in is my sacred gears research and having a good time every now and then. I don't feel like wasting my time with another stupid war. He concluded, wiping his ear with his pinky finger at his last words. He really wasn't interested in being here at all right now. It would be rather stupid to have the intentions of starting another war, knowing the results the last one brought. Serziches joined in shortly after, giving his point of view. I don't want to lose any more of my people, and I know this is the most successful way to accomplish that task. He concluded, sketching a big smile. I agree. Auden quickly joined in, giving Yasaka a quick glance. And I'm sure the lady feels the same way. The woman nodded, handing him a small smile. Issei could only smile, as did almost everyone present at the thought that it was all settled. Very well, we already have all the approvals from the leaders. Michael stated with his typical smile. Now, all that remains is to hear the response from the Dragon Albion bearers. Hearing this, Issei and Vali couldn't help but look at him with a raised eyebrow. After all, it is because of you two that this meeting came about. He concluded, causing the two of them to look at each other for a short period of time. For some reason, Issei felt that Vali would not accept the condition. After all, it prevented him from having a confrontation against him. And in a way, he also wanted to have a battle against the albino. Vali. Azazel sent a glance at the albino, who closed his eyes with a smile. As long as that doesn't stop me from fighting strong people, I don't see a problem with it. For some reason, Vali's words had caused Issei to clench his fists tightly. Did Vali consider him to be worthless? Issei? The aforementioned snapped out of his thoughts after hearing Michael's question, causing everyone to look at him expectantly. Issei fixed his gaze on Vali with great seriousness, who only gave him a smile like the one from that time. It was not one of arrogance or anything of the sort. Rather, it seemed to be challenging him. But, Issei was not a person who only thought about the fights and his pride. When he glanced sideways at Tiamat and Penemu, it was the answer. After all, if he could avoid a battle that would hurt his comrades and best friends, he was always going to take that path. Even if it got to the point of being something dishonorable. I accept. Issei replied, then looked at Vali, who only deigned to close his eyes, not giving the answer much thought. Great. Gabriel clapped her hands with joy. That means we're already only one step away from forming the alliance for the… Vali's eyes snapped open, and from one second to the next, the albino found himself covering the woman's mouth so she wouldn't continue speaking. Everyone was impressed by his action, though much more so by his sheer speed. Gabriel looked at him with a mixture of confusion and surprise, to which the albino responded with a quick tilt of his head to where Riaz and his entourage were, as well as Beelzebub and Roswas. At that moment, she understood that she almost committed a great stupidity. Those who did not understand the albino's action were completely disengaged. Well, only Roswas did, due to the fact that everyone else pretended to know nothing about the prophecy. I'm sorry, Gabriel commented with a big blush full of embarrassment on her face. Don't worry about it. Replied the albino, resting again on the corner of the wall. We all slip up from time to time. He relieved her. Michael cleared his throat, causing everyone to look at him. Besides, we're still missing one person's approval. Now yes, everyone was intrigued by his comment, with the exception of Vali, who already knew more or less where he was going with it. Considering that Tiamat is with Issei, she also belongs to the demon faction. Hearing that, Tiamat glared at him, and everyone started sweating when they realized that Michael had said something he shouldn't have. Just because I'm with Issei doesn't mean I'm part of the demons. The Dragon Queen replied with an icy look on her face, which only intensified when she spat out that last word with great venom. Sorry for the misunderstanding, Michael replied quickly with a rather shaky smile on his face. Yes, of course you're sorry, commented the Dragoness in a whisper that everyone could hear. I don't care what they do. As long as they don't bother me, Penemu or Issei, I'll have no reason to tear their skin off inch by inch. Those last words made everyone tense up at the thought of that scene. Being emotionally bonded with other people and becoming best friends with her greatest enemy, everyone thought Tiamat had changed, even if just a little. It was more than obvious that they were all flatly wrong. She still had that aura of death that could be felt from miles away, in addition to the enormous resentment and repulsive disgust towards the three biblical factions, which only seemed to increase even more in the last millennium instead of decreasing. Well, then Auden spoke up, breaking the tension that had built up. Since we're all in agreement, I guess we're done. All the leaders nodded in agreement. In that case, I'd like to thank you for your time, and Michael was unable to continue speaking, as a resounding tremor that lasted a single second came over the entire room. They all looked at each other with wide eyes, except for Issei and Vali who had the closest window and stuck their faces out the window to see if anything had happened. As soon as they did so, their eyes grew quite wide as they saw how a part of the lower area of the building was emanating a large amount of smoke, while huge golden magic circles were appearing everywhere. Another tremor appeared, but much stronger and more forceful, which ended with the explosion of the roof where they were gathered. A huge curtain of dust appeared in the place, where it could be seen that everyone was fine. "Everyone's okay?" Ross asked, her eyes widening as she saw that Riaz and her servants had completely frozen. This atmosphere, she thought, seeing that the whole place was looking grayer. "I can't teleport back to the city," Beelzebub declared with great surprise. "That's why." Vali pointed to the sky, and when the dust cleared, everyone could see how they were completely surrounded by magic circles that prevented movement. "Lord Auden!" Valkyrie exclaimed, quickly moving to his side to protect him. "Yes, there is someone who is controlling the weather," commented the god with great seriousness. "Luckily, we are strong enough to be affected." "Those magic circles," Azazel thought aloud in great surprise. "Yes, they are made with infinity power," Surziches commented, frowning. "I doubt its office, since they're still very weak, plus there's no reason for her to fight us." "Bottom line, someone borrowed some of her power," Michael completed the Demon King's sentence. "Luckily, it's only an insignificant fragment of their power. I can break them if Auden helps me to do so," Yusaka explained, receiving a quick nod from the god. "Aren't you planning to do anything?" Surziches asked in complete disbelief as he watched Tiamat remain leaning against the wall as if nothing had happened. "Of course not." Her lips twisted into a rather macabre smile. "I told you I wasn't part of your disgusting species, you idiot," she replied. "Unless Issei or Penemu are in danger, I will not intervene in the slightest." Hearing her explanation, Surziches felt like a fool to think he could manipulate her just like Issei. "We can do it ourselves. We just need your support," commented the god with great seriousness, starting to create a magic circle, along with Yusaka. They all surrounded Yusaka and Auden, creating different barriers to protect them from any enemy attack. It didn't take long for those enemies to appear, where almost all of them were humans in disguise, except for some that seemed to be demons. The first one, yes, it was to be expected, but the second one? Demons? Azazel asked in complete surprise. "They are the remnants left over from the previous dynasty," Surziches explained quickly, recognizing a few. "They are nothing. The problem is if someone prominent from the pillars arrives, or worse, the Demon King's predecessor. If they are here, take it for granted that one will show up." Auden replied quickly, glancing at the large number of enemies out of the corner of his eye. "Issei, Vali." Penemu called from inside the barrier, causing them both to look up. "You guys take care of the enemies. We'll take care of this." Right after saying that, numerous magical attacks from all directions began to hit the barrier. Vali and Issei quickly nodded, where they both turned to their balance breaker instantly. "They're probably attacking your other friends," Vali commented as he took it upon himself to beat up a few of them along with his rival. "I know," Issei replied, unable to help but crack a smile on the inside of his helmet. "But I'm sure Gasper will be able to take them on," he concluded, breaking away from Vali as a large combined magical attack was heading their way. Meanwhile, with Gasper and Kaneko. "It was much easier than we expected," commented one of the many women in the room. They were all hooded and wore some sort of metallic mask, probably to hide their identities. "It was only because our leader devised a tool so that the time control would not affect us," added another of the many women as she emphasized some sort of necklace and smirked at the boy and girl hanging on the wall. "That's what you get for believing that species like you are superior to humans." Meanwhile, Gasper remained with his gaze downcast, sweating slightly. Next to him, Kaneko was completely rigid, probably from the fact that she had also been affected by the time control. Gasper gave a small silent sigh, causing one of the nearest women to look at him with slight curiosity. That same woman lowered her gaze, noting a magic circle of red covering the entire room. To think of it, Cao Cao had never mentioned to us that he used his powers through a magic circle, she thought, beginning to doubt. Unfortunately for her, the doubt came quite late due to the fact that the magic circle shone with great force, causing the women to crash to the floor at the same time that their bones creaked as if they were glass due to the enormous pressure on their bodies. Obviously, the screams were not long in coming, but as quickly as they came, just as quickly they disappeared due to the fact that they were all unconscious after the immense pain. Asper quickly cut off the continuity of their power, causing everything around them to return to normal. "Kaneko, wake up," the vampire shouted, whereupon the little girl blinked with difficulty. She couldn't seem to wake up because of all her damage. Plus her arm seemed to have been broken because of Gasper's earlier attack. "Damn, I can't use any more power, or I might hurt her more than I should," he thought, opting for a very worried look. The vampire merely looked outwards thanks to the shattered wall, watching as Riaz and the others began to move inside the huge barrier at the same time that Azazel had started fighting with a strange brunette woman. Though, the strangest thing was seeing how the fallen possessed a golden armor. "I must say I'm impressed," Tiamat said to herself, sitting on one of the many debris in the room. "I never thought Azazel would keep a fragment of Fafnir's soul to turn into a sacred gear." Tiamat's pretty eyebrows furrowed. "Although, I don't know whether to just be impressed or also feel angry," she concluded, at the same time extending her fist to the side as someone tried to attack her from behind, causing her head to explode into 1,000 pieces. "The Great War ended 1,000 years ago," Issei exclaimed, fighting alongside Volley. "Does that mean Azazel kept that shard all this time?" He finished, bumping backs with Volley. "You should know by now, he's crazy," the albino exclaimed, then continuing the attack alongside Issei. "But that doesn't make him much stronger," he added. "Besides being an artificial sacred gear, a small fragment of the weaker Dragon King doesn't make much of a difference." After eliminating many enemies, he turned to give his opponent a quick glance. "But that doesn't mean he's not stronger than Surzich's now. And obviously, that means he'll humiliate Kateria," he concluded, disappearing in a blur that left Issei shocked. Had he been using only a portion of his maximum speed for the entire fight? Seeing that they were being decimated with great ease and that Kateria was having quite a bit of trouble with Azazel, all the enemies began to scatter in fear, making the battle much easier. When Issei finished cleaning up his entire area, he couldn't help but smile when he saw that Gasper was okay, plus that Riaz and the others had jumped into the fight to support. And finally, his gaze parked on Azazel and how the madman had cut off his own arm to kill his opponent. "Looks like there's still a lot of details to improve on, eh?" the cadre wondered with a smile as he took the purple sphere that symbolized the sacred gear, then gave it a kiss. "You'll have to tolerate me a while longer, Fafnir." Did he sacrifice his arm? Issei wondered with a nervous bead of sweat. What on earth is wrong with him? Their internal chatter didn't last much longer as Azazel was blasted to the ground by a strong silver light, causing everyone to look up in great surprise. "What the?" Issei wondered with wide eyes. Azazel sat down in the small crater his own body had generated, then rested his hand on his cheek. "You seem to be confusing your aim, aren't you, Volley?" he asked, looking up. "I'm sorry, Azazel," the albino commented. "I find this side much more fun." "As you wish," the cadre replied as if nothing had happened, standing up as he dusted himself off. "I just want you to answer 2 questions for me, Volley," he concluded, his typical smile not wiped off his face. The albino folded his arms, denoting his interest. Azazel spread his wings until he reached Volley's height. "First question, Penemu has been investigating different rumors of a group that was gathering all people who may be a danger to all factions." Azazel sketched a big smile. "I think it was called the Cows Brigade or something like that." Azazel tilted his one arm up high to emphasize the magic circles that wouldn't allow him to escape. "And it just so happens that the supposed leader of that organization is the same woman who is capable of creating these magic circles, Ouroboros' office." "Are you implying that I am part of that group?" Volley asked, still folding his arms. At this moment, Azazel's gaze became exceedingly serious. "Here's the second question. When I was fighting Kateria, she told me that you were a traitor for collaborating with the usurpers due to the fact that you are the rightful heir to the Demon King's title." Hearing this, everyone was completely shocked, unable to believe what they had heard. At Azazel's words, Volley began to laugh slowly, then let out a huge laugh. "For starters, I'm part of the Cows Brigade. But, it has nothing to do with the factions. Everyone does what they think best due to the fact that office has no interest in our movements as long as at some point we help her get her home back." Volley raised a second finger. "As you may know, interests are varied, so there are different groups within the organization. For the most part, the groups are made up of people who are hungry for power and supremacy." Volley raised a third finger. "And finally." If they were impressed by what they heard, they were even more so now, due to the fact that a few dozen bat wings appeared on Volley's back, at the same time as an immense power surrounded him completely, forcing Azazel to back away where everyone else was. "I am Volley Lucifer, the son of the former Demon King," he exclaimed. Unfortunately, no one could be impressed any more than they were at this point. Except for Tiamat, who seemed to be quite curious at this. "Wait a minute, if it isn't the Demon King's son," the Dragoness thought aloud. "Did you notice?" Penemu asked, approaching her. Being that Volley is only 18 and the physical appearance of supernatural beings slows down after 21, it means that the Demon King didn't die during the fight against Trahixa. "There are only 3 seals." The Dragoness commented, remembering that dimensional prison. No matter what happened before, the important thing now is to know. Penemu couldn't finish speaking as Surziches undid the barrier and took several steps forward. "Where is the Demon King?" Surziches demanded to know, causing Volley to remove his helmet to show him his smile. "I killed him," he stated, as if it was the most normal thing in the world, causing everyone to look at him with great consternation. "Why did you do it?" Beelzebub asked, making Volley's smile disappear immediately. "That's none of your business." The albino glared at him. Beelzebub could do nothing but take a step backwards awkwardly behind the grim look. "I'll just say that I don't completely care about the rain, so there's no need for you to bother me about it," he concluded. Finally, Volley descended a few meters away from Issei, who, to his surprise, he didn't seem to be as impressed as the others. "Did you seriously think I could join a treaty, being that it would prevent me from fighting you? What impresses me is that you didn't want to avoid that," he asked in a rather mocking manner. "Are you afraid of me?" Issei dematerialized his helmet and glared at him. "No," was Issei's immediate response, something that surprised the albino as he raised an eyebrow in consequence. "Don't you have it?" he asked again, raising both his hands as well as his dragon and demon wings. "I am the heir of the rightful Demon King, a half-blood because of my human mother. It is because of this that I was able to become the bearer of Albion." A large amount of slightly bluish-silver energy shot out in various directions, causing everyone's hair to shake violently from the bursts of power. "Not to sound conceited, but I am the meaning of the word miracle. Being a half-breed, I gained awesome power by fate." Finally, the demon wings disappeared, causing him to cross his arms. "Now do you understand? I am the most powerful Hakuryuku of the past, the present, and probably the future," Volley pointed out. "In contrast, you are known as the weakest Sekuryute ever. There is simply no point of comparison between us." A somewhat awkward silence arose between the two. Everyone else also seemed expectant of Issei's response. Against all odds, Volley could see a smile appear on his rival's face. "That only makes it more interesting to me," he replied, causing the albino to widen his eyes greatly. "And I'll just tell you one thing," he continued, materializing his helmet and opting for a battle pose. "You better not underestimate me," he exclaimed, causing Tiamat and Penemu to have a rather unique shiver run through their entire bodies. Finally, Volley was able to react. Usually, he would laugh out loud every time someone surprised him immensely. But, without a doubt, his level of surprise had never reached this high. Therefore, he just materialized his helmet and said a few last words. "Let's see how much your words are worth." Thank you for watching part 12 of this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing and liking the video. I hope to see you in the next video.